Welcome back to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge podcast, everybody, with your host, as always, myself, Alex Connor, where we talk everything training, nutrition, and lifestyle collectively. I hope everyone is keeping well. I hope you're all keeping productive and proactive and positive as much as possible through this very strange and almost weird time that we all find ourselves in right now. However, although there is a lot of negativity and adversity, there is a lot of opportunity for, positivity as well, I believe, and a lot of areas where we can improve and go forth and create positive impacts where we can. And one of them is obviously spreading good information and providing a lot of quality content now that screen time is up and more than ever people are looking for things to do, and probably a good opportunity to do all those things that you may have been putting off that you should do, or perhaps even do the things that you love to do, but you've just not had the time to do. Anyway, first things first, Fearless Training United Academy. We have changed the price for that. That is the Netflix of fitness. That's where you can find everything training, nutrition, and lifestyle related at your fingertips. We've got bodyweight workouts and lots of upcoming things that are more bespoke to the situation. We've got recipes, lots of other content, all in relation for you at this time. And now it's only $10 a week. The Netflix of fitness, cancel anytime, subscribe anytime. Guys, if you've got any questions, email me, ask away. That is there for you so you can still educate yourself, remain proactive, and invest in your training, your nutrition, and your lifestyle. And I say that repeatedly all the time because I think those three things go together, but often they're done backwards. And, lifestyle really is the missing link, I think, which most people do not factor in. Anyway, without further ado, my guest this week is Shannon Beer. She is an online coach at Flex Success, and she specializes in general population, non-athlete coaching, sports performance nutrition, weight cut optimization for non-physique competitions as well. And as always, I will let her do a more in-depth introduction in our podcast. However, some of the topics we cover are obviously the recent COVID-19, her thoughts, recommendations, and perspectives on this topic, her Bridging the Gap series, how, what, and why, and giving you a bit more context around that and what it is and what it entails, and the links are in the description as always. The gray areas of nutrition, eating habits and behaviors, and how to become intuitive, and what does that really mean? How to become a location-dependent online coach, and going through some of her journey and travels, her experience with Mac Nutrition University and what she's done there to date, and her thoughts and experiences with it. And we talk about binary versus critical thinking as well. And we also add in the female strength training, slay some misconceptions, and give some recommendations and knowledge around that area too. So guys, without further ado, thank you once again for tuning in. Remember to leave a rating and a review, like, comment, and subscribe. I've got to say it. Share the podcast. It helps us grow. And without further ado, enjoy my recent conversation with Shannon Beer. Shannon, welcome to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge podcast. Thank you for joining me today, all the way in London. How's it going on your end?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Very welcome indeed. Am I right, by the way? Is it London?
Well, it would have been. I'm actually in Essex at the moment, but
there we go.
No, not going anywhere.
It's a bit like that. It's a bit like that. Well, I mean, look, let's start as we always do first before we dive into the obvious topic on everybody's mind, and I think on the tip of everybody's tongue, which is tell us about you for people who are not aware. Give us a bit of a synopsis, a background, what you do, and more importantly, why you do it.
Okie dokie. So I am a Flex Success coach. So I help people to develop adaptive eating behaviors to help facilitate their goals, whether that's weight loss, weight gain, performance goals, whatever it is. So I work with Flex Success, who are just a team of awesome people based predominantly in Australia, but also I kind of move around everywhere. Nick's in Berlin, so kind of all over the place. I myself have kind of been living nomadically for a couple of years now. Even before Flex, I was studying and traveling, moving around. So I've been around a lot, but now, back in the UK for the foreseeable.
Fantastic. And we'll probably touch base on the becoming, independent online coach, the travel as well. I think that's something that's not really talked about enough, in terms of travel is one of the best educations. And we live in a world where more than ever, perhaps not right now, but usually, traveling around and being able to study and work can be a goal, even for people who don't see it. So it'd be cool to maybe unpack a couple of your, greatest experiences or perhaps challenges as well, and slay some misconceptions.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think a lot of my kind of philosophy on training and nutrition has been influenced by my travels. So that'd be something interesting to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. I think a key word that comes to mind there would be like that adaptability, as you said, and also flexibility. And as some regular listeners would know, as you said, Flex Success, amazing team. Seems like we're getting them all on here, and why not? So amazing. Okay, let's hit the first topic hard. COVID-19. What are your thoughts? What have you got to say about it? What recommendations would you like to put out there? Is there anything that you'd like to get across to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So as we know, it is now a worldwide pandemic, but that doesn't mean that people necessarily need to panic. So I think one thing that we will notice is a lot of people will become a bit more fearful, a bit more anxious, which is totally normal. This is something that, nobody kind of could have foreseen to occur, but do not panic. I think the most important thing is that we practice social distancing. But on the nutrition and training side of things, sure, it may mean that gyms are closing. You may not have access to your usual facilities. But what we can do in this situation, I think, is probably the most helpful thing, is to look to the things that we can do, right? Rather than dwelling on the negatives, focus on the positives. So if you've got equipment at home, then that's always something that you can do. I think the primary thing is that you can still focus on your training and nutrition. You just may need to adapt what you're doing, and it is really important that you stay active and during these times for kind of mental health reasons, to help your immunity as well. If you've got equipment at home, write up a new training program, do what you can do at home. There are loads of things that you can do without equipment as well. I think now is a good time for people to develop new goals. So maybe you could focus on things that you've been neglecting for a while, like flexibility, mobility, calisthenics. You can do all these kind of things. Maybe some cardiovascular fitness, like we at the moment can still go for runs outside. You could probably train outside as well, and even use like infrastructure that you've got, if there's pull-up bars outside, you could do things like that. So on the training side of things, there's definitely a number of things that you can still do. Like it is really important to stay active. You can do yoga, it may not be what you want to do primarily, but we've got to find other alternatives. On the nutrition side of things, I think it depends on what your goal is. It's up to you what you want to do. You may want to have a little rethink. So I know one of my clients was in a pretty aggressive deficit before this all happened, in the lead up to his honeymoon, which has now been rescheduled. So we had a little chat. I was like, well, what do you want to do? Because we know that, we're going pretty hard in order to see what you could achieve before your honeymoon. That's now not happening. We could continue with the fat loss phase if you'd like. I said that it's probably not a good idea to be in a super aggressive deficit at this time. He's based in Singapore, and I feel like they've got a better handle on things over there, but even so, if health is a consideration, it's just one thing to bear in mind. And we've made the decision to just go to maintenance, and he still has access to the gym for the time being. So we're just going to focus on maintaining, and then probably go into a massing phase. So for people who do have access to equipment, I think now is the perfect time to mass. That's what I'll be doing. If you can, why not? A few months ahead of us probably to make some good progress. But on the nutrition side of things, definitely focus on things like taking care of your health. I think is going to be the primary goal for most people during this time. So that's going to be sleep. One great thing is, if you're not going to work, you now have the opportunity to catch up on all the sleep that you've probably been depriving yourself. Around 7.5 to 9 hours per night is a good recommendation for most people. And try and keep a good routine with that as well. And that applies to your day-to-day working life, if you're now working from home and you're not used to it, setting up a good routine for yourself is something you'll probably find really beneficial. If you're not going outside so much, maybe take some vitamin D is probably a good idea. Remember that if you are super lean, because I know a lot of shows have been cancelled or being moved around, you may be immunocompromised, so just take care and keep that in mind. Washing hands regularly, they're the main things that you're going to have to do to keep yourself healthy, along with the things that we're probably doing anyway, which is getting your micronutrients in. I've seen a lot of misinformation already, and you've probably come across some yourself. Two opposing views. This wouldn't have happened if we were all vegan, but it also wouldn't have happened if we were all carnivores. So I mean, it's ridiculous. I think hopefully most people on here will be aware that that's complete crap. I think those are just remain sensible, and I think the mental health side of things is going to be the biggest thing for people to focus on. I think it's that attitude and mentality for a lot of it.
Yeah, a really well-rounded answer. Thank you, Shannon, for touching base on those things, and again kind of encompassing the sleep with the nutrition, the mindset, the training, the routines, the habits, etc., which are really, really important at a time like this. The state of affairs in Australia, a little bit different to the UK. I understand, speaking to friends within Europe, that you're on a little bit more of a tighter ship. You are locked down. Where you are the gyms actually closed? And what is the state of affairs in the supermarket? Are you very much in isolation now?
Pretty much they will be. So my mum works in a leisure centre, and that's just been shut down. So I think the gyms will be next. And I think realistically, it's probably likely that most people at some stage, whether it's, a few weeks ahead, it's probably something that most people will see happening. So yeah, in the UK, we're pretty much about to go on lockdown, and I think London, it will be like a week after us. The supermarkets are a little bit bare at the moment, which I think is actually the case also for you guys over in Australia. And I could give you some advice on that. There are a lot of shelf-stable items that you could be not stocking up on, but just buying what you need. So you don't need to stockpile, but just buy enough to, for here in the UK, the recommendation is to buy enough to last you a couple of weeks so that you're minimizing your trips to the shops. I know that some, perishable items, you may be going out a little bit more frequently, but if this does happen for Australia too, just some advice. There are things like, oats, rice, lentils. The pasta's all gone, so good luck with that. But there are a lot of things that you can buy that will last you a little bit longer. Frozen is also absolutely fine if you can go for frozen, although that's also been sold out here. But yeah, there are loads of things that you can still get, and if you can minimize your trips to the shops, then that's probably a bonus.
For sure. And this is where it's time to get a little bit more intelligent and pragmatic about the approach. And like you said, a time to perhaps, if we reframe it positively, to regroup on whether it is sleep, to focus on if you do have a project, to spend time with your significant other if you do have the luxury of living with them, etc. Getting caught up on all of those things. And I think for coaches listening and trainers, it's a really good time to educate your clients. Might be a time to expand your online presence as well. I think nutrition is key. Show your clients what they can do, just to kind of tag on to what you said there with the basics. Educate them on perishable foods, non-perishable foods, that you can eat a variety of these, like you said, foods that will last longer or they have the shelf life rather than being perishable, and that it's not really going to cause too harm if you do, and you can get your hands on some frozen vegetables, and sticking to those basics without actually panicking or stockpiling, which I think is what a lot of people are doing. I did have a client actually complain because she couldn't get her frozen strawberries this week, and I assured her she would be okay. Australia's been pretty good. The toilet roll situation's not great. A lot of the canned items are obviously going. There's a few panics, but I think here in Queensland we're still pretty good. As far as my gym is aware, we are not closing so far. We might miss the cusp, but we'll know within the next few weeks. And if that is the case, again, we're going to be using these different tools. So what, apart from what you've already mentioned, Shannon, what is the advice that you've been giving your clients now, apart from the body weight and the nutrition? Is there any other sort of little hacks, if you will, or pieces of advice that you've been sort of telling them to do? Obviously, unfortunately, again, same here, all the competitions have been void. So a lot of people are in an amazing condition, but they're actually very vulnerable. Like you said, their immunity is compromised, very low body fat levels. It's a shame for them. One thing I will say for anyone who's listening has competed, it's not a waste of time. It's great data. It's great feedback. It's good to know that you can get in that condition. Hey, it gives you an opportunity to do it even better next time. And you can just think about this as a dummy run. I think one thing that I would do is definitely take photos. If you do have the luxury of getting a photographer, even if it's a few, even if you don't feel like it, it's kind of nice, because when you're in that position, you will look back and realize how lean you actually were and what condition you were in. And you'll regret it if you don't at least get a couple of snaps, and obviously not going too aggressive on the the reverse. But yeah, what has been your thoughts and feedback so far for, I guess, people who have been comp prepping? You gave the example before of your client who was going on a honeymoon. I guess that wasn't necessarily for comp prep. It was more for his own benefit and welfare. But yeah, perhaps talk us through a couple of real life scenarios.
Yeah, well, I don't personally work with comp preppers. Dean, Alan, those guys deal with comp preppers. But I think what you touched on about making the most of what you've done, I think a lot of people, obviously it's a complete shame that, you know, these shows are cancelled and that there's nothing that we can do about that now. But I think if you're in it for like the process and things like that, like none of it is a waste, because you would have learned a lot about yourself, your determination, what you can achieve, the approaches that you've taken, what worked, what didn't work, and all of that can be applied for future shows if that's something that you'll be going ahead with. So I think what you said about taking photos, getting shots done, like that's a brilliant idea. But also maybe just reflect as well on what you did, and make sure you've got some data, you know, what your kind of energy expenditure was, what you were doing, all of that kind of stuff is really useful to know, and take it as a learning opportunity. With my clients in particular, we are focusing on, again, a lot of people still do have access to the gym, so nothing's really changed there. If people don't, then we've got modifications in place, so definitely things that you can still do. So there's pretty much, it's a change of approach, but in a sense nothing's changed. And then with the nutrition side of things, for most people, we're either in we're focusing on, a lot of people are on maintenance phases. So what I talk about, as well as achieving body composition goals, we like to teach people how to achieve their goals, or, you know, how does fat loss occur? How are you going to maintain that? That's something that we're quite big on, because we don't want to get people their results and then leave them to it, and then have people, you know, regain the weight. And we know that weight regain is pretty common, or it's a struggle to maintain. So someone may be able to maintain their weight, but with a lot of effort, and it's difficult, and they become kind of miserable for that. So something that we focus on heavily is teaching people how to have adaptive behaviors. So in this period, if my clients are at home a little bit more, I'm encouraging them to take the opportunity. We've got a lot of learning exercises and resources for our clients to teach them the ins and outs of, you know, what calories and macros actually are. And then most people will track at some stage, but we also like to teach how to live without tracking once you've got that nutritional awareness that tracking gave you. So that's now could be a really good opportunity for people to practice moving away. Again, like you can do anything. There's no one right approach. Now may be a good time to knuckle down on your tracking and educate yourself more. Or it could be a good time to move away. It just totally depends on where you, like, what stage you're at. So we teach something called informed eating, and we have a whole book on this called Life After Dieting, that teaches people how to move away from macro tracking and into informed eating. And it's all about how to maintain your results without tracking. So you've got that nutritional awareness, you're aware of your own needs, and you're also aware of your own preferences. So this could be a good time to practice that, because we realize that a lot of people, it's not something that, some people love it, some people totally love it, some people don't. So we just wanted an approach that would suit those people too. Along with that, as I said, with the learning exercises, I also coach a lot of coaches who may now be experiencing, you know, less work because people may have financial difficulties. Again, I think the situation is slightly different in the UK, so it may not be the case in Australia, but I think it's a good idea just to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. So it's nice to know what could, you know, happen, and then if it doesn't, great, but if it does, you know what you're going to do. So with coaches who are off work a little bit more, or experiencing less demand. Now is a really good opportunity to try and upskill yourself, in the following weeks, following months, however long this may last, so that when things are back to normal, you are now a better coach, right? You've got a better service to offer people. So that's something that I've been talking about a lot with clients, is what they can still do. And there's so many online courses, so much stuff out there. You can refine your services, create stuff. If you've got ebooks, online courses, like now's the time to really knuckle down on that. So yeah, kind of a broad answer, because it just depends who I'm working with, and everyone has like different goals and so many things that you can do.
No, broad, but can at the same time is relevant. You made a lot of good points, and I think this is a great time to now transition into something that, you know, we're both passionate about. When I say we, myself, you, all the team at Flex Success, it's a bit of a philosophy, it's an ethos. Really, it's a way of life. I think this is personally the way things should be done. It's having, as I term it, it's the same adaptability, you know, informed eating, however you want to sort of wrap it up. But having this, I always say, flexible, sustainable, and enjoyable. And if it doesn't tick those criteria, then it will never work. And this is kind of the whole hamster wheel, which everyone is not, you know, or they're on, if you like. And we need to get people away from that. And there's something that I think with tracking, it's a great tool. And we use it powerfully, but if it is a tool, and if it's implemented wrong, it will cause more harm than good, because you can get someone who is obviously, as you know, they then don't track, and then they're married to tracking, and it's like, well, now they've got the same disorder, but it's sort of flipped round in reverse. They can't live without the scales or without tracking everything. So I think it would be great if we could walk through that. Just before we do, though, that last point you made, fantastic. Coaches out there, clients, re-education, education, we should always be upskilling. We should always, if you're passionate about this, if you're passionate about what you do, whether it's, if you're listening now and you're not even into fitness, shall we say, you don't work in the industry, you can still upskill. Something that I do every day, and I believe the best of the best always do that, regardless. And that's how you continue to get better, because there's always more to learn. You know, you can always refine your processes, your systems. You might even be working on your spreadsheets, guys. You might even be helping your clients have, you know, a better looking program. You might implement something else which helps you measure and track progress better. So I really want to just kind of underline that, because I think that's a great point, and this is a beautiful opportunity. And if there is anything more you want to add on, please go for it. Because like you said, there are some great resources, even if you can't afford it. Like you said, getting onto the Flex Success website, you know, 3DMG, Mass, etc. These podcasts, you know, with the right people, you can absorb that information, make some keynotes, implement it. Everything, obviously, it's not going to work. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't try and retain all the information, but, you know, find what works for you. Take something out of it that's specific to your industry and your clients, and give it a go. You know, create a better experience. In terms of nutrition, perhaps we can talk through and streamline how you do that with your clients specifically, this informed eating, and how perhaps, depending on where the client is on their journey, you would, you know, implement the tracking versus, you know, going intuitive, or being able to do this without, obviously, the scales, whether that's using more, you know, basic metrics, basic systems, like, you know, the 3 main meals a day and 2 snacks, or whatever it is that you go about it, or how you would explain it. So perhaps we could sort of delve into that a little bit more, and I'll ask some more specific questions as we go.
Sure. So to determine in the initial stages what approach would be appropriate for a client, we have our initial consultation. So I'll ask questions like, you know, have you tracked in the past? What's your experience with dieting in general? And what are you doing currently? All these kind of things to get a good idea of where the client is at and what experience they have had. We have a number of different approaches. I will then pose the different approaches to the client. So would you like to track, or would you like to try this approach, and see what they prefer? And the alternative, we teach something called the foundation diet, which is a non-tracking approach, and it's just to cover someone's essential needs. So in terms of protein intake and micronutrient intake and minimal fat intake, and then the carbs can kind of, you know, fall where they may. So that's kind of a template. So that's one option, and the client will follow the template, choosing their own foods, but within a certain but there's certain limitations in that we've recommended X amount of foods for each category, and then they can pick and match what they'd like to eat. We do meal plans as well. That's one approach, but it's not a long-term thing. It's just to get the ball rolling. But I do think it has a place, because someone's coming to you for guidance, and they may not know. If they have a very low nutritional awareness, then that's something that could be useful to see some results in the initial stages, which is likely to increase motivation and then adherence down the line. Then we've got a foundation diet. We also teach about discretionary calories. So the foundation diet is to cover your essential nutrient needs, and then discretionary calories are the foods that you love to eat that don't necessarily offer you any nutritive value, but there's also no harm in having them in small amounts. So we kind of teach people about that as well. And then we may utilize macro tracking for most clients, whether it's at the beginning or something that they move on to. It probably will come in at some stage, but I would say that it depends on the goal, and it also depends on the client's current eating behavior. So if they're already engaging in maladaptive behaviors, those need to be addressed before we implement macro tracking. I think macro tracking is a perfect tool to educate, and it's a very efficient tool as well, because you can control things to a greater degree. And because of that, you also get a little bit more flexibility within your diet. But some people just don't do well with it, and you've got to be careful of you don't want to facilitate pathological behaviors, and it's only really does that in a certain type of person. And the reason that I even began speaking about alternatives to tracking in the first place is because I've had great success with tracking. Like, I've never had a problem with it. It worked fine for me. But then when I started to work with more people, I realized that it's not always an effective approach. So then we needed something else. We've probably all had those clients who have been tracking like 1,200 calories and their weight isn't going down. And you're like, something's not adding up. And in that case, as a coach, that data isn't relevant to you, because it's not accurate. So there's no point trying to enforce macro tracking harder on your client, because they may be engaging in things like emotional eating, which is pretty common, I find, like stress eating, or just out of frustration or whatever it is, and mindless eating. Those are often the underlying problem, and just teaching them more about tracking isn't really going to solve it. So we've come up with alternative approaches, and I often will implement non-tracking weeks if I feel that may be something that the client is experiencing. And we teach things like the mindful eating cycle to help clients. So I had one client who works from home and is obviously surrounded by food, and often would find herself using food as a distraction from work. And we tried a mindful eating exercise, and it was almost like a light bulb moment, and her finding out that actually I find that the reason I do tend to go for food is because I experience frustration certain times of working with clients, and I realize it's because I feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm not smart enough, and that's a problem that she wants to address. So that's completely outside of maybe you're just not weighing your food. That's not the solution. You can do food photo diaries. So I think that's something that I do want to get across, is that there are many ways of doing things, and often as coaches we probably are heavy-handed in our application of macro tracking, because that's easy data for us to collect. It's not necessarily the best approach for the client. And if you tell a coach, how about trying a different approach with your client, they may be like, well, then how do I know that the client's adhering? What do I ask them? Like, well, talk to your client, ask questions, ask for photos. If the weight's going down and that's their goal, you don't need to see their macros necessarily. Like, what are you trying to achieve? I think that's something that we should keep asking ourselves, is what are we trying to achieve here? Does this person need to facilitate more adaptive behaviors? Do they need a less dichotomous view of food? Obviously most people do want to lose weight as well, but if it's not working, it's not going to be solved through just telling them to track or making them feel like they're non-adherent. That's something that we could touch on as well, is that I think as coaches we often pathologize non-adherence and non-compliance, and really it's just about finding out someone's I think ambivalence is normal. We shouldn't pathologize that as non-compliance, and we need to employ something like motivational interviewing to kind of see what the client is struggling with and what they really need to work on, and their reasons for change and their reasons not for change, because it's perfectly normal to want two things at once. And I think it seems like a roundabout answer, but that does come back to macro tracking, because if the client isn't, if the macros look correct, but the weight's not changing over a period of time, then you know that something's up. Like, that's your red flag.
Yeah, and let's dive into that a bit more, because that's something that I know myself as a coach has been one of the biggest challenges for me, where it's like, oh, tracking, not tracking. Oh, there are actually other methods, knowing as, when, how to implement them. Also, when there is a time to go, have that conversation. It's not necessarily putting it back on the client to the point where you make them feel uncomfortable. But like you said, talk to your clients. A lot of the time I'll say, hey, how's it going? And they get their food diary. I'm like, no, just verbally tell me, like, how is it going this week? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, just talk me through it. And again, and I like to have a bit of an undulation and a progression over time, and slowly interweave it and sort of take them, depending on where they're on their journey, and then slowly always preface with them, hey, look, we're doing this right now, but this is not always the end goal. Like, we're going to be doing this in the future, and then we'll do this, and we may do this, and we may do this, and sort of giving them that knowledge where it's, oh wow, I'm not going to just be doing this forever, and there is going to be a change, and there is going to be a progression, and there are other options. Because I think people are very fearful of tracking. You go, oh, I've got to get the scales. It's like, oh, you don't have to, but and let me show you, if we are going to do that, there is an easier way to do it. Let's create a better experience. Like you said, they might be predisposed to having, a bad experience with tracking or whatever it might have been. But what you just said towards the end of that sort of, thread of conversation is, there are red flags. Ultimately, yes, there are, a couple of instances where if there is a lot of metabolic damage, or someone has some severe thyroid issues, or a certain disease, like a very specific disease, generally the law of thermodynamics will always prevail. And I think a lot of people are lying to themselves. And again, sometimes it's as simple as, and I think a lot of coaches think they're working out their scope here, and this is not necessarily the case. This is just being proactive. And again, this comes with the education of speaking to your client, creating rapport, creating trust, building comfort as well, so that they feel open, and just saying, hey, look, I'm never going to judge you. I'm on your side. If you tell me what's going on, I can help you. And then it might be like, well, actually, I was eating chocolate bars in the car, and when I eat in the car, I don't count my macros. And now in your head, you might be thinking that's ridiculous and laughing, and being whatever, you have your own thought process. But to the client, for them, that might be, they've rationalized that, right? That dialogue, that reality, they have convinced themselves that in the car, it doesn't matter. I've snuck it in. I've been autonomous with another task, and I've sort of been dabbling my hand in the old Malteser bag, right? And before you know it, that might be 50 to 100 calories. That might be 6 to 7 days a week. Oh, there we go. But the client's not aware of that. So it's almost like that cognitive dissonance of, this, you're unconsciously incompetent, consciously competent, and then moving through that model. And sometimes it is, like you said, you just got to keep coming at it from a different angle sometimes. So let's talk a little bit about that, your experience with clients who perhaps, they've not been completely honest, or perhaps you've had to come at it from a different route. Let's probably talk about those, the other alternatives than tracking, because I think a lot of coaches will really find that valuable, because a lot of coaches are not familiar with tracking. They think it's either just sort of black and white binary, and again, we know that it's more critical than that. It's multifaceted. Perhaps let's talk about other strategies. You did mention some there. I think picture diaries are really good as well, using basic measurements and guides. Another good point you made, I think the foundation diet, as you call it, that's something that I always like to start with. I just like to see what people's behaviors and habits are. Everything is behavior and lifestyle. I'm just like, let's see what you eat. Let's just see what Chelsea eats. Let's see what Joe eats, because it's funny. A lot of the time, some people are actually not far wrong, and the devil's in the details. And sometimes it's like, you know what, Joe, you're actually eating quality foods. You just got the ratios completely not advantageous of what our body composition is. And they go, wow, I didn't realize, like, I'm eating the same foods, Alex, and my body composition is improving. And then with the power of strength training too. So anyway, I'm rambling. I'll hand it over to you, Shannon. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So I'll preface this by saying that I think that one skill that every coach could benefit from is empathic listening. So having empathy for your client. And that doesn't mean feeling sorry for them. It just means understanding a different viewpoint. So most coaches themselves probably got their shit together, right? That you're in great shape, that you've tracked or whatever, like you know what you're doing, but you need to have empathy to understand where someone else is coming from. So I personally, like, I've never been overweight. So this is something that I need to understand in order to help someone, because I've not been in that position myself. And that doesn't mean, as I say, feeling sorry. It doesn't even mean agreeing with your client, but it just means understanding someone else's viewpoint. And that's the starting place. So then when we come on to tracking, as I said, if someone doesn't enjoy tracking, that's not for you as a coach to try and hammer and force your client to do something. You need to let the client decide with your guidance, let your client choose kind of what approach they want to take. So I guess we can start with macro tracking. There's a spectrum, right? A degree of doing things. So you could be on the rigid side, or you could be on the more flexible side, and you could be weighing out everything. If your goal requires that, like a comp prep, you probably will be weighing everything to the gram and may not even be eating out, because you need to be able to control your own food intake. That's a goal that you've determined to yourself. If you understand what's involved, then you can make the autonomous choice, the informed choice, and to give consent to do something like that. If you're someone who just wants to lose fat, then you've got a range of things that you can do. You can weigh the more energy dense foods and not track certain foods like vegetables, or not weigh your vegetables and just, eyeball them. That's a good option, I think. What you want to do with tracking is minimize the friction. So why have someone doing everything, like starting off on that rigid end, if they could get results without going to that degree? Because you can always add more. You can always have the option of, now we're going to start tracking these things, now we're going to start weighing everything, because progress has stalled a bit, let's refine the process. But going from 0 to 100 doesn't really make sense if you could get the exact same results by going to 50, so that's one thing that you can do. If it comes to moving away from macro tracking, you can have days on, days off, weeks on, weeks off. You could track weekdays and not weekends, which may seem counterintuitive, because a lot of people will change their eating habits on a weekend, but it can actually be helpful for someone to practice making informed choices and mindful behaviors. So mindfulness is another skill that, even if you're tracking, is something that you can implement, and that's asking yourself questions like, am I actually hungry? Because like you gave the example of eating chocolate bars in the car, client probably isn't hungry. If they were actually hungry, they'd want a meal that's going to fill them up, and a chocolate bar is something that we just kind of crave. So I think teaching the difference between psychological hunger or psychological appetite and physiological hunger is a key thing. So hunger is a sensation that you will feel, like a gnawing sensation in your stomach. Appetite is that, I kind of just want some chocolate right now, that sounds good to me. That's kind of cravings. And when it comes to fat loss, you need to know how to eat enough so that you're not starving, but you also want to be able to satisfy those cravings. And I think mindfulness is a great skill because it brings awareness to the moment. So in terms of eating behaviors, that's asking yourself, am I actually hungry, and why am I eating, and what do I really want? So for those emotional eaters who may be reaching for energy dense, hyperpalatable foods after a tough day, those people would really benefit from some mindfulness practice and asking themselves, what do I actually need right now? I'm reaching for food because I've had a shit day, but why have I had a shit day? Am I stressed? Like, do I just need to go to bed earlier? Like, what is the problem that I'm dealing with? If I'm tired, am I sad? Do I need some social connection? There are many other ways to meet your needs, and that's not to say that emotional eating is bad in every instance, because that's perfectly normal. But if it's getting in the way of goals, then we need some alternative approaches that you can implement. So that's one thing that I think a lot of coaches probably aren't used to talking about, is mindful eating practices. But it is a very good approach to, as I say, bring awareness to what someone is doing, and it's really good for like binge eating, overeating, those kind of tendencies. So if you think that that's something your client is struggling with, then that would be a good approach to implement.
Yeah, no, some great tools and tips and alternatives, Shannon, as well. And I think a lot of the time we just overlook these things. And I think to probably put it into perspective, like I perhaps, or the perspective I had before I was aware of these was that, oh, it's actually a lot simpler than I thought. And even when you speak to psychologists and a lot of clinicians, it's a very simple process, oftentimes just starting at the basics and then kind of just methodically working through. And a lot of the time it's going back to the basics and just using these, basic educational tools to create an awareness over time. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be anything, overzealous or expensive. It's just about going back and using those fundamentals, which I think is really important. So thank you for sharing that, Shannon. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, just going to say, I think that's a really important point, is that as coaches, we know that clients are paying, to receive a service, but what they're ultimately paying for is results, right? So we think that we have to do all these fancy things. Like, I've got the best spreadsheets out of all these coaches that come to me. It's like, that's not what your client wants. They want results, but they also want a great coach. So that involves, as I say, things like empathic listening, because you want to build that rapport and that relationship with your client, and they want someone who understands their needs. And these are the things that we overlook. It's like, oh, you could get them, timing their food, like even protein distribution throughout the day. If you want to go the extra mile, having some before bed, like, you can perfect things like that. Or you can make the process as enjoyable and easy to follow as possible, educate them along the way, and still facilitate results. Like, that's what your client wants. They don't want to be doing all these extra details that aren't necessarily going to translate into results. So figure out what the low-hanging fruit is, what's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, and they're going to enjoy it and get results. And that's really what they want. They don't really care about fancy spreadsheets and doing all these extra tips and tricks if that's not what they need, only if it's worth doing.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And again, that's what a lot we see with social these days. And, a lot of people who are utilizing YouTube or just their physique, and it's like a bit hollow, or it's not multidimensional. And then it's the same cookie cutter spreadsheet. It's always like everyone gets the same. And the term I use a lot, my clients, whoever's listening will know this, they'll be wording it, is the devil's in the details. It's not what we do, it's how we do it, right? There's only so many foods. There's only so many exercises in the gym. It's like there's only so many chords on a guitar, right? But there is still new songs coming out all the time. So what does that mean then? It means that we're just putting them in different orders with different melodies, and there's all these little different specifics, but there is an order of priority to everything. Like when you learn an instrument, you start with the basic chords, and then you can start to, build it out from there. And it's the same with coaching and everything like that. Like, the basics will always be the best, but, everyone might have, say, some squat variation in their program, but someone might have a barbell squat, someone might have a hack squat, someone might have a goblet squat, someone might, be doing a sissy squat. It really depends on where they're at the moment. And even if you do have, different types of exercises, they might be loaded different. The frequency might be different. The intensity might be different. So I think a lot of the time that education and, like you said, empathy is probably one of the most underrated and powerful tools to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, regardless of whether you're a coach or not. I just think as a human being, just makes you right? Just makes you a better communicator, just makes you someone who's a little bit more humbled, because like you said before, it was a great example. You've never been overweight. Neither have I. I've never been obese. I've always been I was a skinny kid, and so I can never sit there, really and look at a very obese client and go, I know what it's like. It's like, no, I don't know what it's like to be obese. I might know what it's like to feel perhaps inadequate, right? I might know what it feels like to be uncomfortable, to feel like an outlier. But maybe I could also, by doing that, ask myself, what must this client be feeling? What must that be like? And even if I don't say that out loud, I can think about that, and then I can perhaps sort of, create that connection rapport. And like you said, Shannon, a lot of people, even if you give them all the tools you had in your business, that's not what the client's after. The client is after really the way you deliver the service, and at the end of the day, results. And I think a lot of coaches are not capable of getting results because they're not educated enough. They're very binary in their thinking, and they're too busy focused once again on things that do not matter. Yeah, like the aesthetics. It might be the car they drive. They've all got the latest Nike shoes. It's like, oh, forget about that. Like, what's your education? Like, what are you doing every day? Are you don't have to be a nerd like perhaps me and you are, and a lot of us in here. A bit of I'm a closet. Yeah, I'm a closet nerd. But I think if you want to be at the fine tip of the pencil, you kind of got to be, And if you don't love it and you don't find yourself, digressing and reading and finding it interesting, perhaps you need to look in the mirror and pick a different profession. Let's talk about Bridging the Gap, or the Bridge the Gap series. You've worked with Gabrielle Fundaro, I believe, on this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can we define what that is? Maybe we've touched on a few points already in and around that area. Some people may be familiar, some people might not be. Give us a bit of a background and kind of what the juice is around that.
Sure. So the Bridging the Gap series is an article series that Gabrielle and I are working on to bridge the gap, which is the gap is between, we see a lot of discussions between like the weight neutral approaches and then the typical, evidence-based crowd about how or what's the right approach to do things. And I think we often overlook the validity of a weight neutral approach. So something that we talk about a lot at Flex is maintenance. And as I say, facilitating these adaptive behaviors, because with dieting, we know that it can, for some people, if done in the wrong way, it can lead to like negative outcomes rather than positive outcomes. So we see increased pathological behaviors. Dietary restraint is a kind of nuanced topic in that in our promotion of flexible dieting strategies, we may actually be promoting rigid restraint, which is not really something that we want to do. So with the articles, the aim was to firstly educate people on what weight neutral approaches actually are. So that's things like health at every size, intuitive eating, and Gabrielle likened intuitive eating to auto-regulation in training. So how can we listen to our internal cues to facilitate outcomes? And with these weight neutral approaches, the whole point is that they are weight neutral, right? They're not pro fat loss, they're not anti fat loss, which is a big misconception. People often think that weight loss is something that's frowned upon. It's just not the goal. And I think that's an interesting concept in and of itself, right? Weight loss is not the goal. Okay, so what is the goal? What are these approaches used for? Something that with intuitive eating, it's a weight neutral approach to eating, but it's actually like a self-care framework. So it's not even just about eating. It's about someone's kind of relationship with food, to themselves, and physical activity as well. And it's used kind of as a rehabilitation process. So you could liken it to rehab exercises if someone's injured. And we don't see psychological injury, right? Someone's poor relationship with food is something that we need to work on. If someone's displaying those, if you don't have the skills as a coach to work with someone like that, you don't want to work with those people, that's totally fine. But you should be able to recognize when a client is in need of that kind of approach. And if it's not something that you want to be teaching, then you should have the integrity to refer to someone who does, want to deal with that kind of thing. So that's the first thing. So with those kind of people, if someone's got a poor relationship with food, again, that's something that we often like, relationship with food, what does that even mean? But if someone's showing those dichotomous thought patterns towards food, or poor eating habits like mindless eating, emotional eating, or they're coming from a negative place in that they kind of hate where they are, and that's impacting how they view themselves as a person, that's the kind of person who would benefit from that sort of approach. And we just wanted to validate that. That's a totally valid goal, and we shouldn't force someone into something if they're not ready to change. I think the mindset behind why you're doing something is super important. So even when it comes back to macro tracking, totally great approach to use for people who would benefit from it, but they need to understand why they're doing it and what it's for. Like their intentions behind the approach is super important, and there is good evidence to elucidate that relationship between your intentions for change and then actual outcomes as well. You're more likely to get better results if it's coming from a positive place rather than trying to hammer and force yourself into something because you hate yourself, and get into that. But that's something that's super important. The second article was about dietary restraint. So kind of what we've touched upon, like recognizing those high risk populations, and actually athletes are more likely to display disordered eating tendencies than the general population. So that's another reason that we thought it was really important to raise awareness of this, because most of us are working with people who are like athletes, especially those in weight class sports. Is something that they may, the hypervigilance on like body weight and food oriented behaviors is something that we need to be aware of. Obviously with bodybuilding, we know that they are also at risk, and that's something that we're hoping to address with Flex as well. We're coming up with a post-comp program to help people transition back into a normal life, restore a healthy weight, not overshooting it. A lot of people struggle with binge eating tendencies, and I don't know why it hasn't been touched upon more just in the industry in general. I think we tend to see these things and brush it under the rug a little bit. Maybe there's a stigma attached. I don't really know. But all we do know is that it's pretty common and we need a solution. And I think another thing that Gabby and I kind of discuss a lot is the fact that there are no checks and balances within this industry. I've had many people reach out and they're kind of unsure about coaching because they've been scarred in the past with shitty restrictive practices that coaches have implemented for them. And what if there's no regulation? What are we supposed to do about this? So we just wanted to raise awareness of that and kind of pave the way for more conscientious approaches to coaching. And as you mentioned yourself, we need more than one approach. There's a lot of ways to do things, and we need to be facilitating adaptive behaviors in our clients. So if you've only got one tool in your box as a coach, then you're probably not going to be delivering the best results for your clients. So we just wanted to raise awareness of that. We're sick of the conversation around should athletes be eating intuitively? So that's not the point. To elucidate and validate all these different approaches, to know that it's not about what's best, what's the best way to do things. It's about what does your client need and what is the appropriate approach in this current situation.
Yeah, that's very valuable. Is that resource something that people can read on the Flex Success link on the website? Is that available for the public?
The articles are on the Flex Success site, Gabby's site as well, which is vitaminphd.com. They're on the Revive Stronger site, Renaissance Periodization, RP Strength, their site as well. And there's a few more in the pipeline. It's kind of turned into like a pretty big project, so there'll be more out. So I'd recommend reading the first 2 articles on any of those websites. And then more will be coming. So definitely get up to speed first.
Yeah, 100%. I'll make sure for everyone listening, I'll link those articles below. I know that for regular listeners, they will know there'll be a few links there already to RP and Gab's Vitamin PhD, etc. And obviously the past Flex Success website, but I'll put the specific links because I think that's going to be very valuable. Client, coach, personal trainer, whatever related, I think you'll benefit from that. I think it comes down to, and we've talked about this a few times, this whole binary approach, right? This on, off, good, bad, clean, dirty, it's like it doesn't exist. Like it's not about there's not a silver bullet, there's not a magic, it's not Alex, what's the best food to get shredded? There isn't one, but you see there are coaches that will give a one word answer or something similar. And this is what we're constantly battling against, right? Oh, well, so-and-so told me it was this and it worked. Yeah, but that wasn't the reason why it worked. It was the principle. It was the energy deficit. Maybe that was what worked, right? But again, people want quick fixes, this, that, and the other. And like you said, you getting clientele that are coming to you that have had really bad experiences. This is making our career, a lot harder. I welcome the challenge because I think, I'm an optimist. But I think that's where if you do, good work for great people and you upskill, and just because I've got a hammer doesn't mean everything's a nail, and being able to kind of constantly, this is where it comes back to this education, expand your toolbox and be aware of it. To touch base and just give my 2 cents on the whole reverse diet, recovery diet, as 3DMJ have termed it. But again, I guess it's an appropriate name. Again, terminology, tomato, but fundamentally it's that post-comp period. I liken it to that of a car sale or a sale in general. everyone's excited, right? They only care about getting the car. It's like getting into the show, and you get the car and you're at the show, and it's boom. And then it's like, see you later when you're out the door, and now I'm on to the next people getting in the show. And then you have a problem with the car in the car showroom. They don't want to know you anymore. You're not getting that help anymore because you've paid your money. And, and unfortunately, I see a lot of that in the industry. I think there's a lot of good coaches that are not doing that. But again, they are the minority. And we need the integrity, the respect. And we need to, again, bridge the gap, create an awareness. So at least then perhaps from the client perspective, or even other coaches who are hiring, what they think are more advanced coaches, to actually be aware, hey, ask that question. Hey, after my competition, what's the protocol? What's the strategy? Like, what are we doing? Oh, just gaining again. Is maybe a red flag? No, but like, what's the actual plan? Like, have we got a plan? Like, what are we doing? Are we trying to add body fat again? Like in what time space? Are we gonna keep tracking? What is that period? And I think asking these questions is something that we need to help people arm them so that they've got these awarenesses in place, and that they're not going to be perhaps tunnel vision. Because I think, to be fair as well, a lot of people are just not aware, like who have competed. They think it's a game, and I think this is really prevalent in the female sphere, unfortunately. Like, I have witnessed, and I know so many females, and they are just, wow, they are damaged. And I know friends in the gym, and it's so hard to tell them, and they are so food focused, and the language and the behaviors of which they express are just so destructive, and they continue to compete, and they have this social pressure because they've got to look good, so they've got to get the lips done, they've got to get, they've got to be wearing the latest thing, they're scared to eat. I'm like, wow. You should eat. You should not be competing. You need to do a neutral approach. You need to get away from this competition. You need to eat a little bit of food. You need to increase training performance. You need to stop tracking the metrics. And again, this whole tracking system has actually destroyed, I guess, their intuitive side of behavior. And they've got eating disorders. And I think a lot of people are unaware that they've got an eating disorder, because when we think of an eating disorder, people think of something extreme like perhaps bulimia nervosa or something like that. And sometimes that's not it. Like, an eating disorder can be, from what I've learned in my experience, it can be as something as little as, I reach for a food and I eat it, and every time I eat it, I feel guilty. I beat myself up about it negatively. Like that there might sound really minor, but that's a slippery slope. And you've got to kind of try and address that. But again, that's where we need these skills, these tool sets, and like you and Gab are doing, creating these articles so people can actually go, oh, wow, like actually I do that. Like, that's me. Or I've been in that scenario. Oh, perhaps there is a way, and there are people that can help me out with that. So I don't know if you want to add on to anything else that I might have just touched base on there, or if you want to add some more stuff.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point, that people don't realize that these aren't normal behaviors. And I'm not sure if it's because we don't talk about it enough, or if we almost reward those kind of behaviors just with the language that we use. But it's not normal, as you say, to feel guilty after eating. It's not normal to be anxious about eating out with your friends because you don't know what the food is or what the macros of the meal is. It's not normal to feel like you have to track in order to regulate your body weight. You may choose to out of preference, but you should also be capable. Like, if MyFitnessPal went down tomorrow, what would you do? Like, you should be in a position to be able to manage your intake, and you're only doing so out of preference because you like doing that. So it's not normal. Basically, I think we need to raise that awareness that enjoyment is healthy. You are allowed to enjoy your food, and you can do all of that. You could not track, you can enjoy your food, you can socialize with friends, and still maintain a decent physique. It's not one or the other. It's not like tracking everything and avoiding life is the only way to stay in good shape. You can totally do that without. And I think something that we talk about a lot again at Flex is the concept of flourishing health. So it's like, what do you actually want? Like, most people want to look great, but they also want to have a decent lifestyle as well. And they don't want food focus. They don't want food anxiety or fear. And they want to go out with their friends and drink every now and then, and still have really solid training sessions in the gym, right? So it's about thinking more holistically about everything that you want, the psychological side of things, how you want to feel about yourself. And that's something that again, I don't think we talk about enough. And it's just about thinking, what do I want? Do I want to be focused about food? Do I want to be macro tracking for the rest of my life? And the answer is no, and that's currently a position that you're stuck in, then that is something that warrants attention.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's that whole tracking isn't forever, and that shouldn't be the goal. And it's almost as if it's a little bit backwards. And something, again, I think prefacing this with clients, I'm always aware of, and someone explained it to me like this, and this is the way I got it, so I'll share this. It's like, if you're getting surgery, or you're going into a good clinician or a good practitioner, whatever that is, whether it's a theme park, whether it's a dentist or a surgery, they will tell you what's going to happen before it happens. That sounds really silly and really basic. But if I say, hey, Shannon, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little consultation here. We're going to chat to you about what your goals are. We're going to find out, more importantly, why they are. We're going to set some expectations, etc. We're going to find the purpose, whatever it might be. And then after that, we're going to go into the opposite room, and, Dr. Corey Probst is going to be in there. And then what she's going to do is she's going to explain some of these tools and these techniques, and we're going to go through that, right? And then after that, we're going to see Dr. Joe, and we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to eat some food. And he'd be like, cool. Like, it might sound silly, but you know what to expect. Now, with your clients, if you're just like, cool, do this. Now, a percentage of people will just, they're robots and they will do that. But if you don't say, hey, look, this is the plan. Like, obviously, plans in sand, goals in concrete. Like, things will change. And this is about having an open dialogue with your client. Oh, look, like, let me know if your goals change. Like, you all of a sudden fall in love with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but you still want to do some strength training. Like, let me know, because guess what? We're not going to train like a powerlifter, like things are, adaptable. But letting them know that that is the case, and then being able to change things as and when they may, being able to come through. But like, as you said, it's, prefacing that what is going to happen before it happens, unfortunately, and that doesn't really sort of get done a lot, I think, in our industry. But again, it's this backward approach where we need to go back to, as I was saying initially before I went on that little tangent, go back to what we used to do, right? So for most people, if we look, and I'm talking like, let's go back, like physiologically go back, look at what we did, right? We have become, everything's at our fingertips. We've become lazy, right? We've got dishwashers, we do cleaning, we've got cars for traveling, etc. Like, it sounds silly, but all these things reduce our energy expenditure. And again, it's not about, I say to my clients, you don't have to become a wizard, you don't have to become a rocket scientist, but you need to understand a certain level of education. If you do that, you'll be free of this. You'll be free to actually make these better decisions, and you'll never get caught out by the latest fad again. So I said, no, obviously that's not in place anymore. So we have to kind of then go, well, okay, if that is the case, maybe then, something's got to change. And back then no one sat down back in the, the 20th century and was like, right, mate, show me your calories. Like, no, I mean, generally, if you were fat or overweight and gluttonous, you were wealthy, because it meant that you had, great resources. As a king, it was kind of almost seemed to be a good thing. It's like, wow, he's big, he's majestic, he's powerful, he must have all this food at his disposal. We know that that's probably not the best way now. You look at knights, you look at, people who are more active, they had to fight, etc. Perhaps they were more muscular as natural adaptation, or, natural selection, or whatever it might be. And it sounds silly, but we're almost going back to what we should already know, which is actually listening to our hunger signals. Now, I guess the irony there is, you say to someone who's overweight, oh, just listen to your hunger signals. That's not going to work, because the reason why they are like that is because they think they're hungry all the time. And it's like going back to what you said before, is that actually mental or conscious, craving, or is it actually a physiological hunger? Is it a feeling? And then creating that awareness of like, this is what this feels like. This is what this feels like. Here are the difference, or here are the differences between these things. And then actually getting someone sometimes to track, or in some way, shape or form, depending on the tool, facilitate those habits, those behaviors that recompose the body more desirably. And like you said, it might not just be weight loss, because we can see on the scale, sometimes weight will stay the same, it might go down, it might go up, but body recomposition has occurred, to get to the point where, we don't track again. And our hunger signals are in alignment to, the psychological cues, which are congruent to health. And I think that is one of the most, it's a bit of an enigma And it's the irony is it makes me laugh all the time, and sometimes trying to explain that to people. But I think if you can extrapolate out and say, hey, look, like the end goal is to not actually have to use a rigid tool. Like this might be something we're employing right now, but just know that this isn't forever. And if this doesn't work, that's fine. You know what? We've got other tools up our sleeve. We will be able to get you there. And I guess I'll finish off with this before we digress. I sit down with clients and I said, look, all I ask is for an attitude. You know, you don't have to be the most skilled person. It's not about training with athletes. That would have been me in my younger days. Would have described someone really athletic. I said, all I need now is a willingness. If you're willing to try some new behaviors, you know, you've got the attitude to give it, you know, 100%, you want to commit, you want to do this, I will give you the tools, but you have got to apply them, you know, and if it doesn't work, we'll reconvene, we'll problem solve it. We'll figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, I'll find out or I'll refer out. And I think that takes a lot of humility, but at the same time, it's, again, what is in the client's best interest, and sometimes just having a bit more of a listen and caring about your client.
Yeah, great points. I think what you said about, you really raised some great points about macro tracking. It's like, why are we doing this? Like when you think about how people ate in the past, it was perfectly possible to regulate your body weight, you know, without these apps that we now have. And an important point about that is that when we're talking about achieving a physique change, we're talking about behavior change, and eating behaviors themselves are a unique form of behavior. So with the macro tracking, it's like, why am I doing this? To increase my nutritional awareness. Cool. That doesn't take that long to realize the energy density of the food you're eating or the macronutrient composition of the food you're eating. That can be learned fairly quickly. So why are people still tracking years down the line? Like, what are you doing it for? Is it because you're scared of listening to these internal cues? And with these eating behaviors, what we don't realize is they are dictated by a complex interaction between physiology, environment, psychology, culture, socioeconomics, and it's not something that we fully understand, right? And these can be adaptive or maladaptive. They can also be overt or covert behaviors. So as coaches, we need to be using, like you say, macro tracking as a tool for what it is, but now moving away from that when it's appropriate to listen to these internal cues again. And I think having a deeper understanding about how eating behaviors arise, how our appetite works, and our motives for eating as well, because they're multifaceted and we may change our motives for eating all the time, right? I may choose to eat this food because I simply want it, I enjoy it. That's fine, in moderation, not going to impact my goals, can still be, you know, pretty lean, have good training sessions if I eat chocolate, right? As long as I know when I'm doing it in the appropriate amounts. I may choose to go out for a meal with my friends and eat something that I wouldn't otherwise eat, purely because it's the social context of the situation and that's a conscious choice that I'm engaging in. Or I may choose to sit down to something that's high protein, nutrient dense. I'll probably do all of those things, you know, multiple times a week. You know, you eat more than once a day. So we need to recognize the different motives for eating as well. And what are the appropriate choices. Also, eating behaviors develop from a really young age. So I've asked my clients questions about this a lot. I've had clients say that they were brought up being told to clear their plates. So now they just feel like they have to eat everything that they have. I've even had a consultation with a woman whose mum convinced herself that she cured herself of cancer through her diet, and she imposed her beliefs on this woman as a child. So growing up, every time that she chose a hyperpalatable food, she was condemned for it. That's a lot of kind of psychological thought processes to try and unpack and reverse, you know, in teaching someone that it's okay to eat these foods. That's something that we definitely overlook as coaches. Again, so to bring back to the macro tracking and the whole behavior side of things and the behavior change, understand who you're working with. Understands the purpose of these tools, understand when they're appropriate, what the kind of limitations are, what the strengths of these approaches are, and then have more skills in your toolbox to be able to implement, so you can work with a broader range of people if you want, you know. If you don't want that, cool, refer out, like you say. So I think some skills that coaches could benefit from. Things like motivational interviewing, even acceptance and commitment therapy. That's something that a few of our coaches are learning more about at the moment. Alongside that, deeper education into eating behaviors and the psychological side of things as well, and the external cues that we have to eat, the reasons, like I say, the reasons why people eating, these other approaches like mindful practices, intuitive eating. These are all things that most coaches should be aware of if you're aiming to facilitate adaptive behaviors in your clients. And all of that is going to lead to results as well. I think that's the other thing that we tend to overlook. It's like, well, my client said they want to lose weight, so I need to, we need to focus on losing weight, and that means macros. No, that's not necessarily the case. And sometimes we may have these overarching goals, like, yes, weight loss is the primary goal that we're trying to achieve, but let's set these other targets first and we focus on these things alongside that goal, and you'll be moving towards that goal even if you're not prioritizing it. So that's just something to bear in mind, to have, as you say, more tools in the toolbox and using them when they are appropriate.
100%. Setting expectations, I think, is very, very critical at the start of any coaching client interaction, and having some sort of process where you are able to do that, extrapolate, why, define the whys, give the client purpose, set expectations, because not only, again, it might be finding out where they are on their journey, but also letting them know what to expect. Because I know in my younger days, you'll get clients like, "I'm not losing weight, bro. You've trained me for 4 weeks." I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of work to do here. But then perhaps that was not, that was a learning curve for me, because I didn't preface with them, "Hey, look, here's what we can generally expect. Here's the rate of gain. Here's the rate of fat loss. Again, this is a guide. This is not gospel, but this is all by that you are adhering, or that we, find traction. But then if you ask questions, you find out where someone is. You might say, "Hey, look, it's going to take us about X amount of time to get to a certain point. First of all, let's build these habits and behaviors. Here's why, because we want to do this sustainably. This is the difference between 2 and a 12-week challenge and then 12 weeks later having an eating disorder and being double the size. Now, would you," and then you go back and do another one, honestly, would you rather do that, or would you rather actually spend a little bit more time? And again, this is where it's, it can be a challenge to not sell, because I really don't like that word, but to educate, understand, and get the client to buy in, if you will, that this is not a money spin. This is not a way of us trying to keep the client for longer. No, we to give a man a fish, teach a man a fish. Like, I want you to be able to flourish, as you would say, or fly, at some point. I said, the irony of that is you might find that there's a lot more to learn here, and you might really enjoy it, and you might want to take it to another level, etc. But, we're going to need a certain amount of time here. I'll ask for your patience. Again, there's multiple factors. What weight do you think I'll be when I'm happy and lean? Well, that's not a fair, answer for me to actually give, unfortunately. So no, I think that's really, really a critical thing. And then cultural backgrounds. But no, you go, because you wanted to say you go something, and I'll come back to culture, because I really want to dive into that.
So I think that's part of the problem, is that as coaches, we need clients, and clients want results. So we are, using our bodies to promote our services, things like that, and fast tracking fat loss or whatever the goal is at the expense of the client's health. Because telling someone, no, I'm going to educate you, let's work on these things as well, that's not a sexy approach. That's not necessarily going to sell. And I think we're contributing to the problem, because we're trying to get clients in, we're trying to get the money flowing, and we're putting clients' health, at risk, or even damaging, making them worse, all for this kind of glory, like a B&A. We're going to use someone's before photo and their amazing results after. But if someone has achieved those results and is now more miserable, is that really a success? Potentially not, but you can put that on Instagram because no one's going to know. Like, that's part of the issue. And yeah, I think that's something that we need to do better at, have more integrity.
Yeah, 100%. It's always say, I do a lot of video testimonials, although I do have some impressive pictures, and I think most coaches do. And something I always say is, by the way, team, for everyone listening, red flag. If your coach looks phenomenal and they have been working for a while and they don't have, a handful of actual legitimate testimonials, not just in the way of pictures, but actually legitimate people, then that's a red flag, because if you're good at what you do, you should, like, all bullshit aside, you should be getting results for people. And unfortunately, the sad reality is a lot of people aren't. They go, oh, you know, but it's like, yeah, let's sweat, like they're feeling better. It's like, yeah, all right, that minutia works for a little bit, but now you're getting, that's ambiguity. Like, let's talk, like, let's ask the client what they're learning. They're learning skill. Could, like you say, if you can't walk away from your coach at a certain point and be able to maintain some level of adherence, I think you failed as a coach. I know that if I'd been working for a client for an adequate amount of time and that I walked away and they were just useless, I personally think I failed, because I've not instilled education in them. My goal is to be able to give them these tools so that if I had to disappear tomorrow, they'd be like, yeah, okay, nah, I got this. And like you said before, people fear, not tracking. I know when my clients go away, I'm like, great. And they're like, what do you mean great? I can't track. And I'm like, this is going to be a great opportunity for us to get away from tracking and start leading into, but I love it. It's been great. I said, yes, but we discussed at the start, it's not forever. And it's funny, and then sometimes they come back and they're in better shape and they feel better because they're more relaxed, and there's all these little things, and it gives them this sort of lease of confidence. I know this was me when I first went away and didn't track. And funnily enough, you actually eat pretty much the same, right? Because you've been doing it for so long, you get good. It's not sitting at a table and going 30 grams of protein, 23 grams of fat, 5 grams of fiber, and is that some vitamin C? No, it's about going, I know what's high calorie and low calorie. I'm not going to let this impact my meal with these people that I'm having. I just feel like some fish, and now I'm going to have some caviar or whatever. That's a fancy dinner, isn't it? Whatever it might be on the table, and have some ice cream afterwards. But again, it's, you get to, actually put into practice this kind of like this feeling, this intuitiveness, and lo and behold, generally it works, which I think is the goal. But again, people get frightened of it. But again, being able to instill in your clients the ability to at some point do it themselves. All right, they might not be able to do it as well, but over time they really should, because isn't that the goal, to actually help people and help the bird fly, so metaphorically speaking. But I think going back to the cultural element as well, I mean, and that's the same in a lot of things in life, isn't it? The way we react, the relationships, the way we dress, the way we present ourselves is a byproduct of our upbringing. And I think that's been really good education for me. It's something that you can definitely stump you. For example, I've worked with a few clients, more from India, that part of the world, and they might, for example, have really high fat foods, and then you'll work with someone that is, say, in Fiji or something, and it's slightly different again. And you might work with someone from usually in the UK it's pretty the same, or US, and it's like really high processed foods and everything's really cheap, and you get 1% milk, 2% milk. So I think like having that empathy and that education, going, okay, it's actually different. There's a different, and not only culture, but the environment for these people. So perhaps there's new challenges, because that dollar menu is so convenient. Why would that person go out and actually choose a better option or make some food? Or maybe there is a better, quote unquote fast food option, etc. And then knowing how to kind of fill those gaps and go, okay, well, you know what, you eat this, but your cultural background is that you've been raised to pretty much eat a high fat, low carb, no protein diet. Like, how can we supplement that with still not, changing everything or almost discrediting what you've already learned, but how can we complement and enhance that and then teach it from a health perspective? It could be you work with someone, they have to do Ramadan or whatever it is in the Middle East, and it's like, but I can't eat every 2 hours. We don't need to, like setting that education. So I think that was actually a really good point, like the cultural aspect. And again, you don't have to be a historian, but if you're passionate about this, you should know. And maybe this is a good time now to digress into Mac Nutrition. I believe you're a student. I don't know if you've graduated yet. I know we talked with Big Nick about this. I've got other coaches at work who are doing Mac Nutrition. Mark McDonald, I think he's doing some great work in the industry. I know he's faced a lot of adversity and a lot of pushback. Tell us about your experience with that, and perhaps any learnings, teachings, any validities which would help a lot of us in the industry.
Yeah, so I was on the third intake of MNU. So this was, I don't even know what year it is. Like, when was this?
2020.
That's the one. I graduated last November, so I enrolled the previous year.
Oh, I see. Wow, that far back. I'm with you. Sorry.
I had an awesome experience. I think it was not only obviously as the course, like the content of the course itself, pretty comprehensive. It teaches you everything that you need to be able to work with people on nutrition. But I had a great experience with like the mentoring lab, but also meeting other people from the course. So I'm still in contact with a lot of individuals that were in my enrollment. I think going to the live events made a huge difference as well. So I actually flew back from Australia a couple of times to attend a conference and to attend my graduation, just because that's the whole point of doing the course, right? It's not just to learn from it, but to surround yourself with people who also have similar interests. And what I liked about MNU is that they have these core pillars, and one of them was integrity. So it's not about like, you know, trying to rip people off. It's literally about doing the best job that you can and, you know, getting great results with your clients because you care. And then I found that the people that I connected with all felt the same. So if, you know, someone out there is doing the course, I would really recommend getting involved and reaching out to the other people who are also on your intake or previous intakes, whatever. That was when I was traveling, so it's an online course. So I took the opportunity. I was like, well, I may as well go traveling now. And I found that that was very conducive, because I think if you're doing something like that, it's worth putting time into. You know, it's not like a little, how long is this going to take me? I just want to tick it off and get something done. Pay attention. I, you know, went through obviously all the lectures, all the further education, the mentoring lab. They've got a lot of lecture from experts in there. So take your time, go through it, speak to people that are doing the course. Those would be my main recommendations. But overall, I had a great experience, and I would definitely recommend.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's all part of the experience, isn't it? And why not connect with people who are on the same page, you know, and surround yourself with like-minded individuals. I think that's a key to success, but then also bouncing off each other, especially because it is, for the most part, quite online based. It's nice to, you know, make the effort to attend these events and reach out to people and get a bit more support, and even, I don't know, create study groups and bounce ideas off each other. And like you said, it's nice to celebrate that at the end, which is good. But yeah, I think, again, I might put a link as well for Mac Nutrition, because I know it's definitely one of the better courses out there that are impacting and creating an awareness for coaches that can enhance their nutrition and communicate it better for their clients too. Okay, let's talk about, and I'm sensitive, I know we've been on for a while, which is good. I talk all day about nutrition. I'm loving it. But let's perhaps talk a little bit about, you know, becoming an online coach, an online independent coach. You know, how have you, you know, become an online coach? I know we sort of touched base before on the call a little bit, or any recommendations for those personal trainers, coaches out there who want to sort of follow that avenue. What steps you took, what would you recommend? And then perhaps we can tie that in with some traveling at the end.
Yeah, so I think firstly, it's probably pretty difficult to establish yourself as an online coach if you haven't worked with people, or if you don't have any kind of in-person real life presence. So when I first started coaching, even before Flex, I was working in a box, in a CrossFit box, and that's how I first started talking to people, just talking to people about their nutrition. And the online coaching kind of came about because it was something that people needed. It wasn't necessarily something that I intended to do from the start. And as I say, I went traveling. So it's like, how can I still help these people with their nutrition whilst I'm wherever I am in the world? So the online thing became a thing. And I also think joining a team was probably the best thing that I did. And it's something that I didn't even know, because I'm from the UK, and teams of coaches aren't really a thing here. And there's a few people doing it on their own individually, but there's very few teams. And when I got to Australia, I saw the job post for Flex Success, and I was like, I've never thought of this before. Like, what a great idea to join people who have more experience, been doing it for longer. We can all bounce ideas off each other, and that's probably one of the fastest ways to develop yourself as a coach, I think, but we often overlook because we want to work for ourselves. We want to, you know, have our own thing. With Flex, it's not about us as individual coaches, it's the team, the name Flex Success. Like, what does Flex do? You know, you're going to get the same service with any coach. And that's been something that has been so valuable, in that as I say, we can all bounce ideas off each other. And I think if you want to help more people, you're probably better off. You don't necessarily have to work with other coaches, but as I was saying with like the MNU, reaching out to the people that are doing the course and building those connections, you can do that as a coach even if you work for yourself. Is to actually talk to people in the industry, because we're all dealing with similar clients, we've all got similar ideas, and we can expand upon those with discussions. If you're just purely in your own head doing your own thing, then you can't see your own blind spots, and it's going to be very difficult for you to improve and progress. So that's just one thing that I would recommend for the online side of things. Start there, start small, start transitioning some clients, or if you work with people in person, if they do go on holiday, cool, there's a great opportunity for you to offer some online services. Now may be a great time, if gyms do begin to shut, is to think about what you want to offer your clients in terms of training and nutrition, and how you can kind of do that on an online service. So just for some practical things, Google Drive is a very good tool. You can create folders for your clients on Google Drive and upload documents there. Have some video resources. You can put videos on YouTube that are unlisted and send those to your clients, because I do think with the online side of things, it's not just about email communication. I think video is very valuable, and having discussions with people. So I find that the consultations that I have with clients are always very productive, because you can really dive deep into specific issues. So that's just a tip there, is to do keep it like personal as well, and have some video. You can use Loom is another good service to record things, like videos of you talking, or just clips like sound bites, to keep it interactive and personal. And it's not just all about written communication. I do think verbal communication is quite important. Sometimes there's something that you don't want to say in an email because you're not sure how it may come across, so you may want to film yourself getting your point across clearly, because those are some things that can be lacking when you transition from in-person to online. So definitely have those resources available and implement regular. We do, well, it depends when the client needs it, but roughly every month or so at least, as a minimum, I will have conversations with my clients, so that you can have that rapport as well. I think that's really, really important. So just a couple of tips there: expand your network, talk to people, bounce ideas off each other, be open to criticism and how you can improve, because when you're working remotely on your own, it's very easy to get stuck in your own bubble. And then also use things like video links, and remember that you still need an in-person presence, or just a presence outside of what you do. So whether that's with Instagram or something like that, Instagram stories are a good way to get your kind of personality across, the things that you're interested in, and you can use that to get clients from out in the world and put into your own coaching kind of circle. So I think those are some good practical things that people can start working on.
Absolutely. I think it's critical to have, some sort of support network, especially for people who don't work in teams, or if you're just really isolated. I know a couple of coaches, they're like almost bored. They're at home, they don't really have a social life. They're just working on their laptop. And again, from an educational standpoint, it's nice to be able to get feedback, constructive, positive feedback. How can I improve? What have I overlooked? Having that third person perspective, the old two heads are better than one. Also for that social, presence as well. And it gives you that ability to be able to go, I'm kind of a bit stumped here, and you can go and refer out to the rest of your team and kind of get a general consensus, which I think is really important. And one of the great things that has come from social media is the fact that we do have all these resources. Like you said, you mentioned Loom, etc. We've got, Zoom call. We're on it right now, connecting people around the world. They would have thought that was crazy years ago. Well, we can do that now, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think for online coaches, we should really take advantage of that. Those Google Drive folders, etc. How can you? And there's not really a right or wrong way as well. I think that's important to note, because I think a lot of people think, there's got to be just a one way. It's like, no. Some people will prefer a phone call. Some people like a voice message. There are some people who like a beautifully written email, or it might be even a video recording. Could be FaceTime, whatever it is. And I think, again, be adaptive with your clients. You don't have to use the exact same tool. It might be a similar process, but you might know that Jane and Bob prefer the in video call, and Amy and Jess prefer something a little bit different. And I think that's, and ask your clients, guys. Ask. It's so simple. Ask your clients what they want. There's not, you're not always going to get an accurate answer. Sometimes people don't know what they want, but I think that in and of itself is something that gets overlooked. Sometimes it's as easy as just asking people how they feel. So no, I really, really appreciate that, Shannon. In terms of travel, before we go on to my last line of questions, I usually do, what are some of the countries that you visited? Any highlights, any challenges, even if you want to kind of encompass that with, like, maybe when you were online coaching as well, maybe, I don't know, like you couldn't find internet and how you overcame that, or like how maybe you had this travel experience and it helped you connect and it made you a better coach. I don't know. I'm just kind of clutching at straws, but hopefully getting the juices flowing.
Cool. Many stories I could tell, but where I've been, so I've been living out of a suitcase for about 2 years now, so I've been kind of all over Vietnam, Thailand, Bali, Melbourne, Sydney, Gold Coast, did a bit in America, so done LA, New York, Denver, New Orleans, Florida, been to Hong Kong, spent almost 2 months in Japan, Bali a few times, things like that. Where else have I been? Naples, done a little bit of Europe, just got back from Madrid with Gabby. So I planned most of my travel. I didn't really intend to keep going. I thought I was going to travel for a few months, backpack around Asia, then do a working holiday in Australia, and then I didn't really have any thoughts after that. And then I guess I just kind of continued on. Most of my travels have been oriented around, as I say, conferences. And so it's pretty much been conferences and seminars. That's kind of dictated where I go to. That's why I've done a lot of places like Asia and America as stopovers on my way back between the UK and Australia. And I do think that I've learned a lot from traveling that has made me a better coach, and also has facilitated those adaptive behaviors in myself in regards to both training and nutrition, because in some instances I didn't have access to a gym. If I was on like Cat Butt Island in Vietnam for 4 days, there's no gym facilities there. So what am I going to do? I ended up doing like workouts in my hostel room using the bed frame for like pull-ups and rows and then push-ups and the rest of it. So you learn to become adaptable. I did some runs because there was nothing else to do. Bought a skipping rope because I could do that anywhere. Sometimes it involved rocking up to really old school gyms. I remember in Vietnam, I went to one that was like proper old, rusty, and just full of males who were looking at me like, who the hell is this white girl in this gym? Like, it's so random. So I think learning to manage expectations was a thing as well. Just like, well, what can I reasonably expect to do in these circumstances, in terms of goals for myself. And then learning, again, the importance of maintenance, I think, has come from that. Being super adaptive with my eating behaviors, because I am quite a foodie, so I will try anything. So I might be in Singapore eating chendol, which is like this weird icy dessert thing with like sweet corn on it, and just like the weirdest food. And that's, again, probably why I speak about the importance of learning not to track. It's like, I don't know what the macros of this, I don't even know what I'm eating.
Can't find this in my fitness pal. Chendol, it's not here, mate.
That's not a lack of nutritional awareness. That's just like, I'm in a different place. What am I doing? And also thinking about the why behind eating and what do I really want. If I'm going to I was in New York for a month, fine dining, eating multiple courses. It's like my first experience of fine dining. I'm not going to be worrying about tracking or even managing my intake to a certain degree. So I've gone through periods where I might overeat. Like, I never actually end up gaining much weight, because that's the thing as well. Once you're in a good relationship or in a good position with food, you can regulate your appetite. If I overeat on one day intentionally because I'm fine dining, I'm in New York, like, I'm going to have these cocktails, I'm going to, have 5 courses because I can. And I've never had the opportunity to do that before. So that's the appreciation side of things as well. I was like, cool, this is actually a really great experience and opportunity for me, And then having the ability to then regulate your appetite over the course of the day, over the course of the week, the month, or whatever. So utilizing those kind of skills. And yeah, as I say, learning just to live more as well, and have the ability to be super flexible. Sometimes when I was backpacking, I wouldn't even know like what the time was. So I'm not going by the clock and eating out of a schedule or routine. I'm actually eating when I'm physically hungry. Sometimes that involved my energy expenditure, sometimes depending on where I am, will be super, super high. And that involved eating more than I ever thought I would need. I remember one day we did like a jungle hike in Vietnam. Again, not in control of the food. So that's something that I try to really instill the importance of the difference between the external environment and the internal environment, because we're like, yeah, cool, you've got these goals, just manage your environment, you know, prep your food, don't keep these things in the house, buy smaller portion sizes. Like, yeah, that's all great, but how about getting your client to a place where they can control their intake no matter where they are? They could be surrounded by hyperpalatable foods and make conscious choices to have what they want, you know, and not be someone who is super reliant on all these other things to keep them in check. Like, it's great to have routine, obviously that's super helpful, but what do you do when that's taken away from you? You know, you've got to be able to adapt, and that's something that travel has definitely taught me. You know, if I'm on a super long flight, may not have the option to eat, you need to be prepared. It's so many lessons that I could go into, but I think just the main one is having the ability to be adaptable with training and nutrition, and setting your expectations, like having your mindset in the right place as well.
And I think that's a really appropriate way to kind of wrap things up on the educational front. And what a great experience, what a great, you know, example of flexibility. When, like you said, what happens? Like, how that is one of the best tests for if you have achieved or can actually intuitively or be adaptive with your eating and know whether those hunger cues are right, because there are so many changing variables in that scenario. And no, you can't get the scales out, but it's not going to work if you do. And you're not going to find those meals on MyFitnessPal, and that waiter in a 3-piece suit is not going to give a shit about whether he puts extra oil or if there's extra oil in your food, because again, it all goes out the window. And I think that is probably another digression to why certain people in lifestyle choices and jobs as well get quite overweight. It's become very entitled in the way they live. But again, there's no excuses, because I think if you do get to a place where you've learned those skills, again, you can be adaptable, and there is a way to do it. And again, it's always like offsetting, man, you know what, I'm in a jungle today, fuck yeah, I'm going to eat some more food, I'm hungry, like I am burning some calories, you know what I mean, swinging off some trees, I'm climbing some rocks, you know. And another day, like you said, you're in New York, you're back in civilization, you're surrounded by some of the most hyperpalatable best foods in the world, and you know what, you don't do it all the time, so yeah, goddamn, I'm going to go and have that, you know, world award-winning burger and the bloody cookie, and Americans do it all bigger and better and all that jazz, you know. But again, it's a short-term thing. I mean, if that becomes like an everyday thing, then obviously that's not healthy. But again, I think it's like being present in the moment, enjoying things, and not being in your own head. I mean, like, yeah, and you're just making these what I call micro shifts. I say to my client, you'll just do this. Like at some point, you won't even think about it. You'll just reduce that portion size, eat a little bit more, do this, do that, and that's how it should be, with no guilt and no repercussions. So no, I think that's a really beautiful example. And yeah, perhaps some conversations for another time, some story exchanges. I love talking about travel. I think it's, again, as I said before, one of the best educations, and I think it's great that you're able to do that, and something that's quite inspirational for myself. Okay, let's move into the last line of questions that I always ask all my guests. So the first ones are a bit more lighthearted. They're sort of like rapid fire, as Tim Ferriss would put it, and they're just more like whatever comes to mind. So my first one is, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why? Oh, it stumps everyone.
Yeah. I used to say like the ability to transport, like I'd just click and be somewhere in the world. But I'm like, well, I could fly. Like, I've been doing pretty well so far. So maybe it would be, can you have a second brain? Is that a superpower?
You can make anything you want. That's the beauty of this question.
That would be awesome. If I could have another brain so I could learn, like focus on more than one thing at a time, learn multiple things at once, that would be cool, because that would lead to many opportunities, I reckon. Would that be like an interchangeable brain or two heads? How are we fashioning this? No, just almost to like double the capacity. Time, right? Yeah, so exactly, double the capacity. So because time is a limited resource, something that we can't get back. If I could have two brains, I've literally just now made an extra 24 hours in a day. so I could concentrate on two things at once. I could be doing work, I could be learning at once. Yeah, that would be awesome.
I think that's called being a female, isn't it? You already got that.
Yeah.
All the males are like, "What? Come on, bro!" Yeah, all the females are nodding their head like, "Well, it's true. We can multitask." Yeah, no, that is a good one actually, and no one's ever had that question of that answer. I should say. I think that would be quite cool actually. My second one would be a 3D based question. You'll like this one. If you'd have one last meal, or you can reframe it as in, what would be your favorite ideal meal? And I'm talking, it could be entree, main, dessert, drink. What would that look like for Shannon right now?
Oh, that is tough. I've had like some amazing meals. I think one of the most like standout meals I've had, this would probably be my answer, I'd love to repeat, is like an infusion. It was a Peruvian Japanese infusion. So lots of like ceviche and also like noodle dishes, lots of meat. I had duck breast sushi with like banana and mint. Like, just, I quite like creative flavors. So maybe something like that, just any kind of, I like kind of tapas type style dining as well. So like multiple dishes that you share with someone and it's like brought to you one at a time, so it's just like a longer experience. And I quite like smaller portions of really interesting flavors. So maybe something like that meal, which is like ceviche. I think it was like coconut and matcha scallops with like duck breast sushi with banana and mint, and then some like noodle dish or whatever. I had a lot of good food. I think in New York in particular, they do their fine dining stuff really well. Maybe something like that, and then to finish off with a whiskey.
A whiskey. Hey, there you go. You got a bit of Irish in you, do you? That's probably the most exotic. I was going to say the most exotic answer, and then you just finished it with a whiskey, and I'm like, that is now the most bizarre. But this is why we ask these questions. They're always fun. I'm going to switch it to my rapid fire question, because I know the answer to a couple of others based on your first. So I think this will be a little bit more of a thought-provoking one. And that would be, what am I going to give you? I'll go with, if you could go back to an era or a time, where would you choose to go back to? Or I'll give you the option, if you could go forward in time.
I think I would go forward, because I think evolution is a great thing with progressive growth.
He wants to live forever, see?
I would go forward, because to think about how far we've come even in like the past 100 years, like imagine what now, the future would be like. And that's probably something, I definitely go forward, and I can't guess to what that would be like. But even going to like Japan, they're way further ahead than we are. If
going to the future,
like Japan, then hell yeah, I'm going to the future.
Yeah, you stand in the middle of Tokyo, and it's like, oh shit, this is like something out of a movie. It reminds me of
toilet seats for the future. Take me there.
Yeah, it's like what's that one with Bruce Willis now back in the day? It always stuck in my head as a kid. I don't know, all the flying cars and aliens, and there's a few things. I think maybe it was that. I think that might have been it. And then there's also now on Netflix Altered Carbon, which is very much like that, and you just go, I mean, it's creepy, but it's kind of cool at the same time. Like, part of you's like, that's cool, but then part of you's like, but yeah. So I guess then, to follow that up, you've got to tell me, if you could choose to jump forward, but you could only choose once, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100,000, what would you choose? And you had to live there then, couldn't come back.
Definitely as far ahead as possible, like at least 100 years, at least 100, just to see what the difference would be, I mean,
hopefully
bring it with me, but
oh, well, that's true. Yeah, well, you can bring some whiskey. I'm sure that'll be there in the future. Because hopefully you don't like get out and it's like Planet of the Apes, and then there's all apes everywhere. And you're like, shit, god damn it. They were right. No, but no, it's so thought-provoking. Interesting. And my last question, which is a bit more serious, and this is the one that I ask all my guests before they leave, and it's, can you identify a fear that you've had in your life, what it was, how you overcame it, and what you learned from that fear? It can be something small, it can be something big, it can be current, it can be in the past, something that's perhaps a little bit sentimental or meaningful to you.
It's a really good one. It's quite hard to answer because where I am now, I feel like I forget how I used to feel or how I used to think about things. Um, I had a fear that I would never really know what I wanted to do. So growing up, I always took like a bunch of subjects. So I did the international baccalaureate rather than A levels because you got more options. I did a law degree, wasn't interested in that. So I always had a fear like, damn, what if I never know what I want to do? Well, that fear has now obviously been overcome. And I think any advice for someone listening is just to explore the things that you're interested in. Even now, like I always have multiple things on the go. So that's something, yeah, that I never wanted to, well, I always just wanted to know what I wanted to do, have an interest and actually have a purpose and, be making an impact on people. So that's one thing. But to keep it relevant as well to training and nutrition, I think I always had a fear that, well, I don't know if I call it a fear, but I wanted to be able to maintain a good body composition. I remember before I left for the UK, I was to au pair in Australia. So you're living in someone's house and they're buying your food. And I remember having a thought like,
What?
Au pair, and you look after the kids for free accommodation. Have you ever heard of it before?
No, not that. So you look after someone else's kids in their home and they buy your food.
Yeah, like you get free
great.
food, accommodation, and payment to au pair. You can do that, around the world. So that's something that I had set up in Australia. And I remember before I left, I was like, I won't be able to control my food again. And I was like, that kind of put me off. And I was like, how sad is that to think that I could be going to the other side of the world and something as minor as, you won't be able to be buying and preparing your own meals. That was something that would almost not stop me, but it would put me off from experiencing, another part of the world. And that's when I was like, this is a bit silly. Like, what do you want out of life, and how important is things like training and nutrition? And obviously, like, nothing bad happens. You can maintain a decent, physique and still have good training sessions, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's something as well that I overcame, is the fear of having to control things. And obviously travel really puts you in places of uncertainty at times as well. So that'll probably be my answer. Yeah, the fear of not being able to control things and not knowing how to respond. And I think the best way to overcome that fear is to put yourself in those situations.
Yeah, I think that's something relevant that I can take a lot from as well at the minute. I think it's a really good one, especially for people who are very systematic. And what happens when the chips don't land and someone just throws the basket in the air? Like, what are you going to do? And sometimes, you need to kind of like you said, you have to put yourself in those positions to realize that nothing's perhaps as bad as it seems, and that you probably should do those things because you want to get some skills. And like you said, it's a bit sad sometimes if there's such a minute thing stopping you, because we are creatures of habit. And I think as humans, we don't like change. People say we love change. I think a lot of people lie. We don't. We resist it. But change is good. Change is something that is going to happen. You can't stop it, right? It's time, it's evolution. And I think, again, it comes down to that adaptability. So I think that's a really great answer, Shannon. I think a lot of people can relate, and perhaps they should take that advice on board and perhaps go away and apply it a little bit more. Get out there. As far as I'm aware, you only get one go at this thing we call life. So try things, figure out. There's no right, there's no wrong. Like you said, you did law, you didn't like it. Cool. Next thing, you know what? It's another great learning experience. So you go to a different country, you liked it, you didn't like it. Again, this is life. There has to be ups for there to be downs. There have to be downs for you to enjoy the ups and all that carry on. So I think that's really good. And you mentioned, training and nutrition relevant. Well, I love to talk about everything training, nutrition, lifestyle. And while we're on the topic, I think this is really important for all the listeners to understand that this is the third trifecta, which unfortunately is getting left out of this massive equation. People think it's training and nutrition, then lifestyle. It's not, because what happens in your lifestyle is a direct correlation to how adherent you are and how your nutrition and your training is depicted. So really, perhaps we should zoom out a little bit and give lifestyle a little bit more credit and look at what lifestyle do we want to live? and let that be congruent to the training and nutrition, because otherwise I think we'll find ourselves in a very unhappy place. Or sometimes, yeah, we might have a great physique, but if that's all you've got and you've got no relationships, you've got no travel experiences, your career, like really, that's a little bit sad at the end of the day. So I think something that I really try to bring with my podcast is finding out who the other person is on the end of the line, and, you know, what their lifestyle looks like, what are their, you know, habits, behaviors, their wants, their likes, their fuck ups. Like, this is all part of being human. And again, it's raw knowledge because it's meant to be raw. It's meant to be real. And I think it's great. And I think you've really displayed, you know, and gave us great examples of both of those sides today with, you know, yeah, you know, you're a great coach, but you've also been able to be adaptable and take yourself out of your comfort zone. So I really enjoyed the conversation, Shannon. And yeah, thank you for making the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And for people who want to follow you, find out more about you, what you do, obviously we've referenced some links, some articles, etc. Obviously Flex Success. Where's the best places to find you?
Best place would probably be Instagram, so that's at @ShannonBeer_, and I'm also on the Flex Success page, so Flex_Success. The articles will be posted on the website, but as you say, we'll put the links in the show notes. So I'd catch up to speed with those because there will be a few more coming out in future. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I don't know where I'll be in the world. See what happens next. Hopefully be in Australia again soon. So yeah, if you've got any questions about anything that we've discussed today, then definitely reach out. It'd be cool to have some conversations based on this.
Great. And as always, I'll put those links in the show notes below. And yeah, until next time in another location, guys, thank you for tuning in once again. Make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, take 5 minutes. If it's safe to do so, leave a rating and a review. Let us know what you like. You know, it helps us spread the word, helps us get us out there, and again, create a better awareness to create a more positive impact. So until next time, guys, as always, stay fearless.